$233,000 in Weymouth, $331,000 in Malden, and almost $399,000 in Boston. That's how much money certain local police officers made last year. In many cases, it's more than their police chief or city manager.
Departments often blame overtime for those inflated salaries. 25 Investigates is digging into why those extra hours are piling up. As Wale Aliyu explains, some of the overtime shifts are not by choice. Wale?
We submitted public records requests to dozens of police departments in the Commonwealth to see how many hours of overtime the officers in your city have been working. We've been sorting through hundreds of documents and found in some weeks police had to work an extra 40 to 50 overtime hours, partly because there just aren't enough officers to go around. And police tell us the problem is only getting worse. If you're a police officer, good luck punching in a 40-hour work week. In Boston, we found several officers who made well over 6 figures in overtime alone last year. Several Brookline officers averaged almost 80 hours per week. In Woburn, overtime gave some officers nearly triple their base pay. So how did the OT hours get so high? Police tell us the answer lies partly in public backlash against law enforcement. National cases like Alton Sterling, Tamir Rice,
put your hands up, show me your hands,
or most recently, Tatiana Jefferson, adding to the rift between community and police, and subtracting from the pool of would-be officers responding to your calls.
Everybody's always filming, and police officers are always in the spotlight. So I think that kind of deters people from applying.
All right, Tony.
And undeterred, Angela Viles walked into the Haverhill's chief's office in October to interview for a position the chief needs.
We're very desperate
to fill.
It literally keeps me awake at night. If I've got officers working 70, 80 hours a week, I don't want somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning doing one of these and hitting a tree or another car or something else. It's very frightening for me that our officers have to work this amount of hours to get the job done.
I want to break down those numbers for you. Here at Haverhill PD, there are 89 officers on staff right now, but they have to cover 109 positions, plus detail shifts. So the hours pile up trying to protect the city 24/7.
You don't want to lower your standards. You know, we don't want to bring an officer in and in 2 or 3 years he says, no, this isn't for me, which we do see. Officers come in, they do 3, 4, 5 years, and they say, no, I'm going to do something else now. That's devastating. The hours, the hundreds of hours in training we put in these officers.
According to Police Executive Research Forum, 69% of voluntary resignations nationwide happen in the first 5 years. Chief DeNaro blames the number of mental health and substance abuse calls overwhelming some new officers. Work-life balance, another concern.
Older officers are more interested in working as much as they could and making as much as they can financially. The newer officers are more interested in how much time they can have off.
It drives up the overtime, and a lot of that is forced overtime.
Lynn's police department sees the same issues. Resignations and retirements have left them with 25 unfilled positions. So are you worried with guys working 80, 90-hour weeks, carrying a gun, driving behind the wheel? How much of a concern is that?
Huge concern. You can only stretch those officers for so long before it becomes a burden. Like you said, the family life gets affected drastically, and fatigue is certainly an issue when you're working multiple doubles in a row.
And police say those fatigued officers who are constantly being watched sometimes fear making a life-changing decision.
Put your hands up, show me your hands.
And end up leaving the force with no one to take their place.
When I took the exam, there were several thousand people that were on the list to become Quincy police officers, and now it's down to about 140.
Why do you still want to do it?
I just want to help my community. You know what I'm saying? I think of it as the bigger picture. You know what I'm saying? Just wanting to give back.
And we've put together a map on Boston25news.com so you can click on your city and see the average hours officers work and how much it's costing you, the taxpayer.
It really is eye-opening. Wale, you found out that all this overtime is actually having an effect on public safety.
Absolutely. Listen, from slower reaction times to morale, coming up tonight at 10, we show you the effect all this overtime is having on our local police. That's tonight at 10.
Great reporting, Wale. We look forward to your report at 10. We'll see you then.
You could see officers work, 40, 50 hours in overtime in a week. Absolutely.
Oh, police officers buried with overtime hours and racking up huge salaries. At 6 o'clock, we told you how a lack of new applicants and the resignation of new officers is overwhelming local police departments with overtime.
Boston 25 News reporter Wale Aliyu has been talking to local departments for weeks and shows us how all those extra hours are affecting the officers themselves and their ability to protect us, Wale.
They're carrying guns, driving for several hours, and are asked to make split-second life or death decisions. But our investigation found some police officers are working 16-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week, and serving on just 4 hours of sleep. We dug deeper to find out how that's affecting morale and how they respond. Hop in with any police cruiser, and you'll quickly see the job is non-stop.
There's a beanie in progress up the street. I gotta go.
And sometimes when you're supposed to stop, you can't.
Start a road detail at 7 a.m. and then you're supposed to work a 4 to midnight shift. And then all of a sudden at 11:15 or 11:30, there's a bad car accident or a stabbing where you're forced to stay.
Short-handed departments across the country have no choice
Have a good day.
but to force officers to work longer shifts than desired, no matter what.
I believe there was 4 people getting forced over onto the day shift.
In Framingham, a double shift almost stopped this marriage proposal. The day Officer Ryan Porter scheduled a romantic getaway to Iceland with his then-girlfriend, his department needed overtime hours.
I'm in a panic calling her, telling her I'm probably not going to be able to make the flight. So
Lucky for her, Porter's co-workers stepped in to fill that shift, just like they have to fill in for retirements, resignations, injuries, and military deployments. Proving an officer's vow to serve the public can sometimes come first.
Obviously safety, I do worry about him. They all look out for each other, so that helps me sleep at night, and also I don't listen to the police scanner.
But that non-stop scanner can take a toll on officers. Our investigation found several departments paid officers almost triple their base pay because of overtime and detail. We even found some officers averaging almost 90 hours per week.
We also have a 16-hour rule. You can't work more than 16 hours and then not get the 8 hours off. After 16 hours, you need an 8-hour break before you can get back on the job.
But not all departments have strict limits, and even those that do say it's an issue. So are you worried with guys working 80, 90-hour weeks, carrying a gun, driving behind the wheel? How much of a concern is that?
Huge concern. You can only stretch those officers for so long before it becomes a burden. Like you said, the family life gets affected drastically, and fatigue is certainly an issue when you're working multiple doubles in a row.
Doctors tell 25 investigates if overworked officers don't catch up on their sleep, the results can be dangerous.
After being up 16 hours, that's equivalent to a blood alcohol content of 0.05. If you're up for 24 hours, it's the same reaction time as having a blood alcohol content of 0.1, which is beyond the legal limit.
The interesting thing about a lack of sleep is that it affects everybody differently. I actually had about 7 hours last night, and my numbers are pretty good. But when you have a lot of nights with a little sleep, it not only affects your heart rate, oxygen levels, and blood pressure levels, it can also affect the way you think.
The issue with sleep debt is that the person thinks that they're going to make an adequate decision when in reality they don't have that capability.
Sleep doctors say the issue is exacerbated with jobs like law enforcement because of the stress that comes with it, and those officers agree.
Getting through the shift is okay, but then it's, you get home and you're staring at the ceiling because now you were just running around and had people coming at you with questions and trying to get through a crazy scene, and now you get home and it's not like doing construction where you just hop in bed and you got nothing really on your mind.
So what's being done? A couple of departments I spoke with have implemented aggressive hiring plans and collective bargaining agreements to help keep up with attrition.
So it seems hiring is really one of the key issues here. They've got to get more officers on the force. But I'm curious, Wale, are there any laws in place that limit the number of hours that an officer can work in a given day or even a given week?
No, not that we found. The closest thing to a solution we found from lawmakers is a proposal to allow for retired officers to work more detail hours like construction or sporting events. It's definitely also an issue that's on the radar for the Massachusetts Police Association. And we've put together a map on Boston25News.com so you can click on your city and see the average hours officers worked and how much it's costing you, the taxpayer. You can also see our early report on the underlying causes for all of these overtime hours.
It's amazing to think split-second decisions oftentimes police officers have to make, members of law enforcement. You want to be able to react with the proper sleep, the proper rest.
And sometimes you're getting just 4 hours of sleep. I mean, we found the story just by talking to police officers on scenes of stories that we cover, and sometimes they've been on shift that day for 12, 16, 18 hours and 80, 90 hours a week. They haven't had time to do laundry.
Yeah, you just feel for them. Well, great reporting.
Thank you.
Need some help. Thanks, Wale.